Imagine a party where everyone knows each other, seasoned guests who've been swapping stories for decades, each with their own style and agenda. Then, out of nowhere, a new guest steps in. Someone unexpected, instantly turning heads and shifting the entire vibe of the room. In the world of global media, China is that guest. And lately, they're not just passing through, they're making themselves at home in the Latin American corner, setting up shop in cities from Mexico City to Buenos Aires. Suddenly, the old regulars, BBC, CNN, and other Western giants, are left wondering what's going on. Their decades-long dominance is being quietly but steadily challenged. For years, international news about Latin America has focused on crisis and instability, protests, corruption, and economic woes. These stories, often told from afar, have shaped how the world sees the region. But now, Chinese outlets like CGTN and Xinhua are telling new stories, spotlighting tech startups in Brazil, cultural festivals in Peru, infrastructure in Colombia, and even environmental initiatives in Chile. Their coverage highlights progress, innovation, and partnership. This isn't just a new perspective, it's a full-on media charm offensive. Chinese networks are investing heavily, hiring local talent, and producing content tailored for Latin American audiences in Spanish and Portuguese, making their stories feel closer to home. China's not just reporting, they're building relationships on the ground, embedding themselves in communities, learning the local context, and gaining trust. They're signing deals with local media, offering training workshops, and even sponsoring scholarships for aspiring journalists. These partnerships are reshaping the region's media landscape. The big question: is this about balanced coverage, or is there a deeper play for influence and power? As audiences compare narratives, the stakes for shaping public opinion have never been higher. Who tells the story matters, and as we'll see, it matters most for those who've been left out of the narrative. Women, indigenous communities, and everyday Latin Americans whose voices are finally being heard in new ways. Why is China suddenly so interested in Latin America? The answer is layered, rooted in history, economics, and shifting global power. For most of the 20th century, the United States treated Latin America as its backyard, shaping politics, trade, and even media. But over the last 2 decades, China has quietly but steadily increased its presence, moving from a distant observer to a major player. Since 2000, trade between China and Latin America has skyrocketed from just $12 billion to over $450 billion in 2022. China is now the top trading partner for Brazil, Chile, Peru, and Uruguay, and a key investor in infrastructure, mining, and energy. With over $140 billion in loans and billions more in direct investment, China's economic footprint is massive. When you invest at this scale, you want the story to be positive, about partnership and prosperity, not suspicion or fear. That's where media comes in. By establishing their own newsrooms and partnerships, Chinese outlets can shape the narrative, spotlighting job creation, development, and cultural exchange, while downplaying controversy. The timing isn't accidental. As US-China competition intensifies globally, Latin America becomes a strategic battleground. China offers what it calls a no-strings-attached partnership, no lectures on democracy or human rights, just business and development. At least, that's the official pitch. Chinese media coverage in the region tends to avoid criticism, focusing on mutual benefits and success stories. This approach resonates with countries that feel patronized by Western narratives. It's a classic case of soft power, winning people over by attraction and persuasion, not by force. China wants Latin Americans to see them as partners, not outsiders. By becoming a major news source, China aims to win hearts, minds, and long-term influence in Latin America, potentially reshaping the region's alliances for decades to come. Headlines reveal everything about perspective. The same event can look like a crisis or a triumph, depending on who's telling the story. Take a Chinese-funded dam in Ecuador. Western media might warn of debt traps and sovereignty concerns, while Chinese outlets highlight partnership and green energy. In one memorable case, a Western reporter interviewed local fishermen worried about environmental impacts, while a Chinese documentary showcased schoolchildren visiting the dam, learning about renewable energy. The same facts, 2 very different stories, one cautious, one optimistic. For every warning about hidden costs, there's a feature on new jobs and technology. Western outlets focus on risks and geopolitics. Chinese media spotlights cooperation and progress. In Brazil, when a major port was renovated with Chinese investment, Western coverage zeroed in on political strings attached, while Chinese news ran interviews with local business owners praising the economic boost. This isn't a one-off. When protests erupt, Western media sees chaos. Chinese media sees citizens expressing views and governments restoring order. During a wave of demonstrations in Chile, Western outlets ran live feeds of clashes, while Chinese reports focused on government statements and calls for dialogue. Each side chooses what to spotlight, shaping how audiences perceive reality. A single infrastructure project can be a symbol of hope or a warning sign, depending on the narrative. Neither is necessarily lying, but both are selective. One journalist told us she wrote two versions of the same story, one for a Western wire service, one for a Chinese outlet, each with a different headline and focus. The result? Audiences inside and outside Latin America get very different pictures of the same events. A family in Quito might hear about opportunity, while viewers in London see only risk. Who frames the story shapes what the world believes. In the end, it's not just about facts, it's about which facts get the spotlight. Why should women care about this media battle? For many, the answer is personal, because the stories told shape real opportunities and power. Take Ana, a software engineer from Mexico City, who says seeing women like her in the news inspired her to pursue STEM. Western media often paints Latin American women as victims of poverty, violence, or oppression. In fact, a 2022 study found that over 60% of international news stories about Latin American women focus on hardship, rarely on achievement. Chinese outlets, meanwhile, highlight women as entrepreneurs, scientists, and leaders. For example, Maria, a biotech founder from São Paulo, was profiled by a Chinese news agency for her innovations, something she says never happened with Western outlets. This shift matters. It offers new role models and challenges stereotypes. When girls see women celebrated for their achievements, it broadens their sense of what's possible. When the narrative is one of competence and progress, it fosters respect and equality, not just pity or intervention. In Colombia, a recent survey showed that women exposed to positive media stories about female leaders were 30% more likely to seek promotions. Media literacy is a feminist issue. Knowing who's telling the story is a form of power. As journalist Camilla from Lima puts it, if we don't question the narrative, we risk losing our voice. By questioning frames and seeking diverse perspectives, women can reclaim the narrative. Across Latin America, grassroots media collectives led by women are already rewriting the script. It's about taking control of the story and of our own futures. When women shape the narrative, they shape what's possible for the next generation. Step inside CGTN's America's newsroom, and you'll see a diverse, buzzing space, where the hum of languages and the click of keyboards blend into a symphony of global storytelling. Journalists from China, Latin America, the US, and beyond work side by side, sharing story leads and cultural perspectives. China hires local talent and seasoned Western journalists, building credibility and authenticity. As Dr. Maria Torres, a media studies professor, explains, CGTN's hiring strategy is about credibility. Audiences trust familiar faces and local voices. The on-air team is diverse, not just in appearance, but in background and expertise. Anchored by women of color, the newsroom reflects a global audience. As one anchor shares, I bring my community's stories to a global stage. Reporters file stories from São Paulo to Beijing, connecting continents in real time and offering local context to global events. This isn't accidental. It's a deliberate soft power move. Professor Li Jiang, an expert in international relations, notes, media diversity is a strategic asset for China's global ambitions. The message, "We look like you, we are you," is reinforced through community engagement and local storytelling. It's a sharp contrast to Western networks, often criticized for lack of diversity. Studies show CGTN's teams are more representative of their target audiences. By projecting openness and collaboration, the newsroom fosters trust and engagement with viewers worldwide. China counters the image of being monolithic or authoritarian. As one global media consultant puts it, it's about shaping perception, not just reporting facts. It's a curated image, but a powerful one in the global perception game. especially when breaking news puts the spotlight on their professionalism. The newsroom itself becomes a symbol of China's new media ambitions: high-tech, multicultural, and ready to shape the narrative on a global stage. China's media push in Latin America isn't just about news, it's about rewriting the global story, one headline at a time. It's a subtle, strategic campaign to reshape how the world sees power, progress, and partnership. For decades, Western media set the agenda, framing Latin America through their own lens, often with stereotypes, sometimes with suspicion. Now, China wants to define the debate, presenting its model as a legitimate path to development, one that promises respect, opportunity, and a new kind of partnership. This is called discourse power, the ability to shape what's normal and desirable, to decide which voices are amplified and which are silenced. By building its own media ecosystem, China bypasses Western gatekeepers and speaks directly to global audiences, offering a narrative where China is not a distant superpower, but a neighbor and a friend. In Latin America, where many feel misrepresented or ignored by the West, this message resonates. It's a promise of dignity, visibility, and a seat at the global table. The goal? A world friendlier to Chinese investment, politics, and influence, where economic deals are easier, alliances are stronger, and China's vision of modernity is embraced. The media is the vanguard, preparing the ground for China's rise, one story at a time. In this new era, every broadcast, every article, is a brushstroke in a much bigger picture. China isn't just broadcasting from afar. Its journalists are rolling up their sleeves and working side by side with Latin American colleagues. They're embedding in local media, co-producing stories that matter to both regions. Through content-sharing deals, small outlets in Bolivia or Peru get free, high-quality stories from CGTN, like a feature on sustainable farming or a profile of a local artist, subtly shaping public opinion while spotlighting local voices. It's not overt propaganda. It's the normalization of a worldview, woven into everyday reporting and editorial choices. China also invites Latin American journalists on all-expenses-paid trips, like a Peruvian reporter who covered the Shanghai Expo, or a Colombian anchor who toured Chinese tech hubs, building personal ties and positive impressions that last long after the flight's home. Confucius Institutes teach Mandarin and culture, inspiring students like Maria from Lima, who now reports in both Spanish and Mandarin. Meanwhile, Chinese media celebrates shared heritage and cooperation, highlighting stories of friendship, like the annual China-Latin America Media Forum, where journalists swap stories and traditions. All of this reframes China as a partner, not a distant power, turning headlines into handshakes and newsrooms into bridges. Over time, these bridges make Chinese perspectives part of daily life in Latin America, from the evening news to children's cartoons. Influence grows, one broadcast, one collaboration, and one friendship at a time, proving that the most powerful stories are the ones we tell together. The person holding the microphone shapes reality. I remember the first time I saw my mother on TV, reporting from a flood zone. Her words brought comfort and hope to families who had lost everything. In that moment, I realized, stories can heal, or they can divide. For centuries, that's been the West. Their voices echoed across continents, shaping what the world believed about itself. My grandmother used to say, if it's on the BBC, it must be true. But whose truth was it? China's rise in Latin American media is a direct challenge to that monopoly. Now, a new generation of journalists, some who look like me, some who speak my language, are telling stories that were once ignored. If all you hear are stories of crisis, that becomes your reality. I met a young woman in Bogota who said she stopped watching the news because it made her feel powerless. Why do they never show us building, only breaking? She asked. New stories, of innovation and partnership, change perceptions. When a local paper covered her solar project, that same woman became a role model for her neighborhood. Stories can spark possibility. This matters for women. When storytellers are diverse, new voices and new dreams break through. I've seen women journalists push for stories about single mothers, about girls in STEM, about hope. Women's experiences and leadership are more likely to be seen. When a woman leads the newsroom, stories about women's victories and struggles make the front page. The fight for narrative control is about dignity and representation, not just geopolitics. I marched with women demanding to be heard, their their voices trembling but determined. "We are not just statistics," one shouted. "We are the storytellers now." Ask, who's telling this story? Whose voice is missing? Every headline is a choice. Every silence, a story untold. Recognizing the storyteller's power is the first step to being a critical, informed global citizen. When you listen, ask, and demand more, you help shape a world where every voice matters. So, what does this mean for you? In a world overflowing with information, your choices matter more than ever. The news is now a crowded, multi-lane highway. No single truth, just perspectives. Every headline is a lane, every outlet a different route. Our job isn't to pick sides, but to think critically, compare CNN with CGTN, and look beyond the surface. Notice the words, images, and experts each uses. Ask yourself, what's being emphasized? What's left out? For women, this is vital. Representation in media shapes not just perception, but possibility. The stories we hear shape how we see ourselves and each other. They can inspire us to dream bigger, or hold us back. If we only hear stories of victimhood, we risk internalizing powerlessness. But we can choose what we internalize. Seek out stories of strength and leadership. Celebrate achievements, resilience, and progress. Be an active media consumer. Demand stories that empower, that reflect the diversity and potential of women everywhere. Not just those that shock or discourage. You have the power to choose what you let in. More voices can mean richer conversations, if we listen critically, and with empathy. Next time you see a headline, pause. Ask yourself what's behind it. Ask, who's holding the microphone? Whose story is being told? And whose is missing? What story are they selling? What story do you want to hear? Your media shapes your world, and you have the agency to shape your media. So take control of the remote. Seek out stories that uplift, inform, and empower you. Be the change in the conversation, because your voice, your choices, and your curiosity can help build a more informed, connected, and hopeful world for everyone.